Hi, I'm Lisa Harper, and we'd like to welcome you to the On the Road Book Club series. We're going to be looking at a collection of minor prophets for the next short season. It's called Tough Love and Tender Mercies, 3 short stops in the minor prophets. And I want to introduce our book club to you. This is Kathy Perdue. Kathy is married to Ed, a pediatric dentist, and has 3 little peds of her own, Meg, Price, and Hall, 3 kids, and is a runner and likes Pilates and a gourmet cook. And this is Sue Johnson. Sue is basically kind of my big sister in the Lord, has taught me all the correct things that I know. Sue's married to Dan. They have 2 grown boys and just moved to Nashville about 15 years ago. Used to live in Texas, and Sue was the teaching leader for Bible Study Fellowship here in Nashville for I think 13 years. Had lots and lots of women, so she's kind of the Bible guru. We ask a lot of questions. And then to my immediate left is one of my dear friends, Julie Johnson, and Julie and I have known each other for a while. She's probably one of my most fun friends, big fan of NASCAR, works with Compassion International, so she goes all over the world basically helping the oppressed and teaching kids about Jesus. And then to my right is my best friend slash sister, Kim Hill, and Kim has 2 little boys, Graham and Benjamin. Well, Graham actually isn't so little anymore. He's 12 and bigger than Kim and almost as big as me if I diet. And Kim is a pretty fair singer when she's not doing book clubs as well. Thank you for joining us for this On the Road Book Club. We're excited you're going to spend the next couple of weeks with us. Okay, y'all, let's jump right in. This is the very first chapter of Tough Love, Tender Mercies on Hosea. And the first question, we're just going to do 2 from this chapter. The first question is, it's been said that all great stories include the 4 main themes of Scripture: creation, the depravity of mankind, redemptive love, and death or heaven. Which one of your favorite books or movies is a good example?
One of my favorite books of all time is The Agony and the Ecstasy by Irving Stone.
Yeah.
It's a whole historical fiction about Michelangelo, and it goes through, I mean, I happened to go to Italy right after I read it, so it was just like, are you kidding me? But it's just this beautiful picture of Michelangelo's creative process, and how, you know, that whole quote about, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set him free.
Yeah.
And as you go in Florence down this hallway where the David is, there are these statues that are in blocks of marble. I'm sure y'all have seen them, and they're emerging.
Last week.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you were there. And they're these emerging sculptures that are only half carved, because he felt like in each block there was already something there, and so carving till you found it and set it free. So they're these half carved sculptures as you walk down, and they're kind of these figures emerging from the marble. And so when I think about creation, I think about, gosh, this piece was already here. Like he waited and he looked at the David and just that piece of marble for years before he carved it.
Yeah.
Because he was just waiting to find him.
It reminds me of, you know, Augustine says, all truth is God's truth. And one of my professors was saying that anytime you see something great in literature, in film, in art, God is in that. Not that, I mean, it may have nothing to do whatsoever with, you know, exegeting a scripture. But if it's good, God has given them that gift, whether they acknowledge him or not. I mean, obviously God anointed Michelangelo's hands that he could do something like that. So I like that. Anybody else? Books, movies?
I think it's impressive you just used the word exegetical or whatever.
Yeah.
I went, oh my goodness.
After your Italy thing, I needed something
Were you about
big.
to take God bless you?
Quite something. Sorry, I didn't mean it. Just was funny.
Well, my thought was not near as cultural, but I love the movie Terms of Endearment.
Yeah.
And to me, it walks through the 4 steps real clearly when she's a baby, the creation of the child, and how Shirley MacLaine is so attentive to the child, and then their relationship has become so tense, and shows her depravity as a mother and as a daughter as well, and then the redemption before. Can't remember the actress's name.
Yeah, Deborah Winger.
Thank you.
Oh,
Before she dies, how they reconcile and how precious it is, and then she dies. So that was the first movie that came to my mind.
That's really good. Susie,
Well, what pops in my mind when you say depravity is anything World War II, or any war, I guess, but Schindler's List just popped out to me because in the midst of all that depravity, it's what one person could do in saving lives one at a time, and just to change the situation of our depravity.
You know, I think whenever we go to something like a movie like The Passion, that immediately kind of stirs up all this great conversation about God with believers, with people who wouldn't claim to be Christians. But I think movies like Terms of Endearment, Schindler's List, we ought to always, especially as Christians, to me, we ought to always read fiction, look at movies through the lens of the gospel, because that's the culture we're plopped in. And God is relevant. He hasn't stopped being relevant. And sometimes we think it can only be, you know, a Christian film that we see at church, or it can only be a book you get at the Bible bookstore. And I'm not advocating us to just be, you know, go see Alien the Resurrection and try to find the gospel theme in that. But I think it would be good for us, and especially good for the relationships we have with people who maybe won't darken the door of the church, to go, let's talk about just kind of the whole redemptive process in, you know, Terms of Endearment, in the films we see, the movies, I mean the books that we're going to see with other people. Second question, and this one's a little harder. Many people, including theologian and church father John Calvin, have questioned why God would ask one of his children to marry a woman he knew would commit adultery. If you had to write a paper or engage in debate on this subject, how would you justify, and obviously we never have to justify God, but how would you justify God asking Hosea to marry a whore? That's what the word literally is in the Hebrew. So how would you justify that? And that's a tough thing, that God tells this good guy to marry a very bad girl. How would y'all, what do y'all think about that? Kim, you were quiet on the last question, so I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think, you know, I thought about that verse in Romans. It talks about, you know, some would die for a righteous man, some would die for a good man. But I think to ask him to marry someone who would be considered a whore is an example of, you know, what we would kind of say was one of the worst things you could be. And so I think it's again a picture of God's just incredible love and mercy for us, when really we all are her. You know, we all at some level are her. And I think, you know, it's easy to relate to her, but I think, you know, I know we're trying to talk about him. You know, why would God ask him to do that? And also just was thinking about Joseph and thinking about, you know, if you look at little parts of Joseph's life, you would say, well, gosh, why would God allow his brothers to sell him into slavery? But then I love where Joseph says, you know, at the end, he says he's thankful for all that happened to him. And I think about that in my own life, the times when, you know, I've gone through something really awful, but yet I can look back as I see the rest of the story, even here in this life, you know, where I only still see part of it, but I can look back and go, you know, I'm thankful that happened to me because of what God worked in me as a result of it. And I think, you know, because of the picture that Hosea is for us of who God is, I think it, you know, helps it make some sense.
That's good. You should talk on every question.
Okay, then. It relates to the other Romans verse of God using all things for the good of those who love him. And, you know, hindsight's 20/20. And but Hosea he trusted the Lord and he had faith. And
I'm glad you brought that verse up, because I think a lot of times we take that verse out of context and we make it, God will work all this out, so I'll get it exactly the way I want it. Like God's a vending machine. If put in the right spiritual quarter, you know, I'll get out kind of the outcome I was hoping for. But I think 10 verses above that one, I know it's in the same chapter, you know, Paul talks about this world isn't our home. We're going to groan here. We're not going to get everything we want here. And he talks about that if you get what you hope for right away, what is that? You have to hope for something you can't see sometimes. So I love the context of Romans 8:28 in God's going to work this out. You might not see it yet. His ways are above ours. So when he